Everyone has their own personal story when it comes to how they started investing, and this is mine. I've not scripted this in any way. I'm going to be somewhat vulnerable. I'm going to give you some personal facts about myself, so please do be kind in the comments. So I started investing in 2020. It was March, I believe. No, it was February. But what happened to me was I woke up on New Year's Day in 2020. I was like, right, I need to take some control. I just bought a house, this house that I'm in now, and I put myself way over my head, to be honest with you. And I was like, right, I need to sort something out for long term. I had no savings whatsoever, no investments, obviously. Because I just bought the house, any free cash that I had disappeared. And I had 2 kids and a family. And I was like, right, we got to sort some stuff out. So I woke up New Year's Day and I was like, let's get a plan in action. I didn't know what that was going to be. I didn't know if I was going to be starting a business. I didn't know if it was a side hustle or what the hell it was going to end up being. But basically, I started reading, and one of the first books I read was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. He's somewhat of a controversial character now, but basically that taught me the difference between assets and liabilities, basically the difference between owning things that effectively give you money in the long term versus things that depreciate, like cars. So I had no assets at that point apart from my private pension and my house. Now, I was in pretty good shape in terms of my private pension, and that was going to put me in a place where by the time I was 67, 68, I was going to retire relatively comfortable. But I wasn't happy with that. I wanted to retire before then. I wanted to create much more freedom. I've always had a dream, and it continues to this day, I live in Derby, in close to the city centre. I had a dream of buying some land, buying a farmhouse, a small holding, whatever it may be, and living. That's what I like to do. Being outside, I like growing vegetables, keeping animals, that sort of stuff. That is my dream. That is my ultimate dream. That's why I started all of this. And I wanted to find out a way that I could do that without having to work 40, 50 hours a week. So we'll take a step back now. So I was born in Ireland. I lived there until I was about 8 years old. It was a relatively happy experience. I was born in Dublin. I moved to a small town just outside Dublin called Ashbourne. I didn't even, obviously up until the point I left Ireland, think or consider anything about money, really. We were comfortable. We had everything that we needed. Then I was 8 years old. My parents got divorced and my mom decided to move to the UK. So I came with her and we ended up in a really rough area of Birmingham, dodgy as hell. I started a primary school there, really rough primary school. And my real name, believe it or not, here's the first insight, is not Neil. My real name that I was given at birth was one that I actively avoided all of my childhood because of the grief that I got for it. So my real name is Cornelius. Cornelius, believe it or not. I like it now. I wish I kept it, but when I moved to a rough area of Birmingham, my name was Cornelius and I had a really strong Irish accent. That didn't go down too well, shall we say. So I forced myself to lose my Irish accent, which is why you can barely hear it now. Let's go out for a couple of pints and you'll probably hear it then. So if you ever see me in a bar, it'll come out then. But basically, I forced myself to lose my Irish accent, and my mum went into the school and was like, right, we need to change his name on the register and stuff like that. But it still crept out, Cornelius from Ireland with his Irish accent. So I got a lot of grief for that. Lived in Birmingham for about a year and we had no money then. We were staying at one of my mum's friend's house in a council estate. I was sleeping on the floor basically, and we were there for a year and it was horrific. It was problematic, shall we say. Then my mum met a new guy and we moved to a nice village. And from there, everything sort of settled down. So it's still, traumatic moving country, going to Birmingham. I remember I was in the car on the way over to England and I said to my mum, I realised at one point, I was 8 years old. I was like, oh crap, what language do they speak in England? Do I need to learn a new language? That was bizarre, isn't it, what you think when you're a kid? Anyway, so I lived in this small village and that was really happy. We were comfortable, right? We got to a point then where we were comfortable. My stepdad was an accountant. He owned his own practice, but that sounds a lot fancier than it is. It was just him. And he was a professional piano player as well. And we lived there relatively comfortable. Had, ate 3 times a day. We were in a small house. We were the poorest people in the village, but it was absolutely fine. To be honest, it was the happiest time of my life. And they say that you do learn your financial habits from very early on. Even then, at that age, I was like, right, I always want to have a level of wealth. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know how it's going to be, but I always wanted to get myself. I don't want to be rich. I don't want to be driving around in Lambos and Ferraris and wearing Rolexes. That's not my style. That's not what I want. I'm not lavish in any way. I just want a level of financial independence. And right from the beginning, that's what I wanted. So I lived in a good area. I went to a good school, but I underperformed very massively. I did okay in GCSEs, pretty much Bs. But then in A-levels, I crashed out pretty much. E's. I got 2 E's in A-levels. It probably doesn't mean much to people these days. I don't know what that is. A 2, a 3. But I managed to get into university in Liverpool. I went to university in Liverpool and I dropped out of that after the 3rd year. So that was a bit of a car crash as well. I just enjoyed Liverpool too much. I was having too much of a good time, right? And when I left Liverpool, I then moved in with my sister, but that was a really tough time. That's when I was properly like depressed. I was sleeping on the floor. You know those terraced houses, those 2 up, 2 down houses? I was sleeping on the floor of the dining room for about 1.5 years with no money, no motivation. I was staying up late, drinking too much, sleeping all day. I didn't get a job for over 1 year. I was just properly depressed. And I hated that. I hated that time more than anything. That was the worst time of my life. And that then, on top of the childhood that I had, gave me the real drive to sort myself out. And it took me a long time to get to that point. So I got a job eventually. I was working for a brewery, Molson Coors, in Burton-on-Trent. And I worked there for about 10 years, and I worked my way up to eventually becoming a R&D innovation manager. And then I left there to increase my salary. I wanted to significantly increase it. That was about 10 years ago, 15 years ago now. And I joined another company where I doubled my salary. And at that point, I thought I had made it. I was on £52,000 a year, I think. And I was like, I never want to ask for anything more. Given the background that I had, I was absolutely pig in shit. But then you start having kids, don't you? And things change a little bit and bills go up and your lifestyle creeps and you get used to that. So then I moved company again and I significantly increased my salary again, about 40, 50, 60%, something like that. I can't remember. That was around 2021. But before that point, I'd started investing. So I moved company at 2021 then. So in 2020, I started investing. After I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, I read Andrew Craig's book, How to Own the World. And that set me off on my path. I basically copied and pasted everything from that book. And at that point, there was no content creators on financial independence, investing, anything like that. So I basically bought 5 ETFs on Hargreaves Lansdown, because in that book, Andrew Craig massively promotes, he wasn't paid for it, but he recommends Hargreaves Lansdown. However, Hargreaves Lansdown got a massive fee, 0.45%. So I stayed in that for about 1 year. And my first investment was into 5 ETFs because I'd read How to Own the World. Instead of buying an all world, I bought a UK ETF, I bought an Asia ex-Pacific ETF, a European ETF, a US ETF. I think that was about it. Japan. And I invested into that. I started at £400 a month in 2020. I opened a trading 2&2 account then as well. That was prior to them not taking on new people. I don't know if you remember that. It was about 1 year where they weren't taking new people on. They grew too fast. And I bought an Apple stock for 20 quid. I remember that. I was absolutely buzzing at that. I then was dripping into the Hargreaves Lansdown account on a monthly basis, £400 a month. I'm putting the odd 10, 20 quid into trading 2&2, and I was just buying random stocks. That was the point then in the middle of COVID where content creation really took off, and there was a whole load of terrible, unreliable creators that were pumping all sorts of bullshit stocks. I looked at a couple of them last night. Alpine 5 was one of them. Open Door was another. The since down 90% and these creators that were pushing it have completely disappeared, by the way. But I bought a load of junk and I saw some gains within it. And what's one of the most dangerous things, they say this about gambling addiction, when you first start gambling, if you get a really big win early on, that's bad news. You're out forever chasing that high. So, but it didn't take me too long to realize, maybe about 1 year. And I thought, right, I need to cut that out. So I stopped investing into a whole load of individual crap businesses. I sold a load that were up. I still have kept some from that time. Microsoft, Apple, I still have. What else have I got? Tesla, I recently sold. That was the biggest grower in my portfolio. That was nearly a 10-bagger for me. And then in 2021, I thought, right, I really like this stuff. I've learned a load of stuff about it. I'm going to start a channel. I started a YouTube channel, which was terrible. Oh my God, it was so bad. I've since deleted all the videos. I'll put one live. I'll put the first video I ever did live. Have a look at it. It's basically me talking over my Hargreaves Lansdown account in a really dull and boring way. I mean, I'm not that much better now, I suppose, but You do learn over time. What I wanted to do was track my progress to financial independence, and I wanted to try and inspire and help people to get started as well. As well as, we've got to be completely honest here, I wanted to monetize it at one point. It took me a year to do that. YouTube is really hard. It took me a year to get 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours. And then I started trickling a little bit of money. Not very much at all. Certainly less than the £1,000 trading allowance that you get. And I took that money and I invested that as well. And I was like, right, well, there could be something to this. Then in 2022, I completely moved my portfolio over to trading 2 and 2, and I transferred my ISAs across, and I started getting a lot more aggressive. So at this point, I'd moved to this new company, and I started maxing out my ISA. So £1,666 a month into my ISA, the majority of that going into my All World, which at the time was a Vanguard one, since changed to Invesco because it's cheaper. And I kept that up basically from 2022 until where we are now, maxing out my ISA as much as I could. Now, during that time, we saw proper drops in the market, but I kept going because of everything that I'd learned. And as a result of that, I built up a portfolio, which is now sitting at, here it is, 120 odd £1,000. But in order to get to that point, I made significant mistakes and probably lost a whole load of money. And that is why so much of my content is around trying to get it right from the beginning. Now, everyone goes through a journey, right? And I went through it, and it took me longer than necessary to learn from my mistakes. So I tried to cover all the mistakes that I made on the channel so people don't make the same ones. But then I kept on with the YouTube up until beginning of last year. And so that's a couple of years worth of grinding out at it with medium level of success. Probably got up to around 4,000 subscribers at that point. Starting to make a bit more, a few quid, more than the trading allowance. So then self-assessment comes into place. Then Christmas 2023, I started uploading my YouTube videos onto TikTok, and some of them just absolutely blew up. I was waking up every morning with 1,000 new subscribers, which I was doing that now. It doesn't happen anymore on TikTok. Especially around junior ISA content. I did a whole load of junior ISA content. It just really went well. And I was like, hang on, might be something to TikTok. So at the beginning of 2024, I really concentrated on TikTok. And over 2024, I completely ignored YouTube. But TikTok did really well for me. And it reached a point where I was making average salary pretty much on it, from affiliates, from ad revenue, combined with the YouTube. All of that sort of stuff started to pay off. So it takes ages, unless you're really lucky or really talented right from the off, unless you're a Damien, who is just brilliant from the beginning. It takes time. But the one thing that I have, which has helped me with content creation and with investing, is I never bloody stop. Once I commit to something, I never stop. So I'm 4 years into content creation now, only starting to make a little bit of decent money out of it. I'm 5 years into investing. I've reached a portfolio which I'm really happy with. And I'm on track now to reach financial independence by the time I'm 50. I lost my job then in March. I was made redundant through a restructure. And that then refocused the mind a little bit. So at this point then I'm thinking, right, shall I give content creation a proper go at it? I've lost that guaranteed monthly salary, which is massive. That's what hooks you into business life, isn't it? Into employment. So now I am going to give it a go. I don't know what it's going to mean in terms of my deposits into my ISIS. I've put £10,000 in, just short now. I got a handsome redundancy, which gives me the rest of this financial year to give it a go, which is exactly what I'm going to do. It does now mean that whilst I've never ever done really sponsored content on YouTube, I've just done my first one, sponsored piece of content. So hopefully you'll bear with me, because I am going to have to try and start generating revenue through this. And the way to do that is sponsorships. Now, I'll never take any dodgy sponsorships. I've turned down dozens, if not hundreds, of crypto type sponsorships. I could have already made tens of thousands of pounds by sponsorships, but that has no longevity to it. If I do one dodgy crypto platform sponsorship, that's it, channel's over. You'll never trust me again. You'll never listen to a word I say. So here I am now, April, May, what? Not even then, we're May, June. Bloody keep up. June 2025, 5.5 years into investing, 4 years into content creation, and we're going to give it a go. So if I can ask you anything for you, just, give this video a like, subscribe if you haven't, and also if you've got any ideas for content that you want me to cover, let me know. So listen, that's my story of how I started investing. Also, let me know how you started. What was your inspiration? What got you on this journey, and how far along you've come, what you've learned, and what's your ultimate goal? Because the only reason we do any of this is to have a goal. So mine, as I said, is to get that farm. I don't want the Lambo. I just want the farm. All right, thanks for watching. Any questions, let me know.